AITA for telling off a guy who ghosted me? When I first started talking to him, let's call him M, it felt like one of those rare connections you don't find every day. I was 21, he was 24, and although he lived 2 hours away, the distance didn't feel like a problem. We spent hours messaging back and forth, late-night calls that lasted until my phone battery died, and long conversations about everything from our childhoods to our favorite shows. After just a few weeks, we agreed that we weren't seeing other people. It wasn't official, but it felt serious enough. He told me he liked me, that he wanted to see where this could go, and I believed him. I was excited, genuinely excited, in a way I hadn't been in a long time. The thing about him was that he seemed so reliable, so down to earth. He wasn't the flashy, overly charming type. He was calm, consistent, and I thought that meant I could trust him. But as I would soon find out, trust is fragile. And sometimes, the people who seem the most steady are the ones who end up shaking your entire world. Things between M and me felt steady at first. We weren't rushing into anything, and the distance between us almost made it feel safer. I wasn't the kind of girl to fall head over heels after just a few weeks, but with him, I found myself opening up more than usual. He had this way of listening, or at least pretending to, that made me believe he was genuinely interested in me as a person. That we talked every single day. Sometimes about little things, what I had for lunch, how his day at work went, and sometimes about heavier topics, like family, trust, and what we wanted for the future. It felt like we were building something real, something with potential. That's why, when the first red flag showed up, I brushed it aside. It happened about a month into talking. He called me one afternoon, his voice sounding rushed, almost panicked. He explained that his car was in the shop, and he had rented one to come to my city to check out a house. He was planning to move closer soon, he said, and this was a big step for him. Then he hesitated before asking, almost like he was embarrassed. Could you spot me $30 for gas? Just until tomorrow. I'll pay you right back when I get my deposit back. I froze for a second. $30 wasn't a huge amount of money, but it wasn't nothing either. And it felt strange. We weren't even officially dating yet. And here he was, asking me for cash. But at the same time, he framed it like it was connected to his future, to our future. Moving closer, being more available, making this relationship easier. So, I convinced myself it was fine. It's just $30. He'll pay me back tomorrow. It's not a big deal. I sent it to him, trying to ignore the small knot forming in my stomach. He thanked me, promised again he'd give it back the next day, and even said if he had extra time, maybe he'd swing by and see me. That night, I sat there, checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for a text, maybe even a call saying, "Hey, I'm nearby, let's hang out." But it never came. He messaged me later, apologizing, saying he didn't get the chance to stop by, but he'd definitely pay me back tomorrow, and he did. True to his word, the next morning, the $30 was back in my account. I told myself it was nothing, that it was actually a good sign. He followed through. But deep down, I couldn't shake the unease. Not because of the money itself, but because of the dynamic. I barely knew this man in person, yet I was already investing in him. And he hadn't invested much of anything in me. I told myself not to overthink it. We were good. Things were good. But I should have paid more attention to that knot in my stomach. Because it was only the beginning. The day after he returned my $30, I felt like I could finally relax. In my head, that was proof that I could trust him. He wasn't using me, I told myself. He kept his word. And sure, he hadn't stopped by to see me when he was already in my city, but I made excuses for that too. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he didn't have time. Maybe he really was just focused on the house he was supposedly looking at. I wanted so badly to believe the best in him. But less than 24 hours later, everything fell apart. I was scrolling through social media when I saw it. A picture of him. At first, I smiled. It wasn't unusual for him to post, though he hadn't been very active lately. But then I looked closer. He wasn't alone. In the photo, he was standing next to a girl I didn't recognize, his arms slung casually around her shoulders. They looked comfortable, familiar, like two people who had known each other far longer than I had known him. And the caption? Something about good times in the city. My city. My heart dropped into my stomach. At first, I thought maybe it was an old picture. Maybe he had just uploaded something from months ago. But as I clicked through, my chest tightened. The timestamps were from the same night. He told me he didn't have time to stop by. The same night I had been waiting for a call, checking my phone like a fool, and it wasn't just one picture. There were several. Him laughing with her, them at a restaurant I knew well, even one with her parents tagged. He hadn't come to my city to look at houses. He had come to meet her. I remember sitting there, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. My face burned hot with embarrassment, my stomach twisted with nausea. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the humiliation. He had lied straight to my face, asked me for money, promised me a future, and all the while, he had been planning to see someone else that I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream, to call him right then and there and demand an explanation. Another part of me wanted to block him immediately, erase every trace of him, and pretend he had never existed, but I didn't do either. Instead, I poured myself a drink, and then another, and by the time I reached the bottom of the bottle, I had made up my mind. If he thought he could ghost me, lie to me, and then parade around with some other girl in my own city, he had another thing coming. That night, fueled by equal parts anger and alcohol, I picked up my phone, and I let him have it. By the time I picked up my phone that night, I was buzzing with liquid courage. Normally, I was the type of person who bottled things up, who replayed arguments in my head but rarely let the words out loud. But not that night. That night, the alcohol loosened every filter I had, and all the anger, humiliation, and betrayal I'd been swallowing for weeks came bubbling to the surface. I opened Facebook Messenger, the only platform he hadn't blocked me on yet, and my thumbs flew across the keyboard faster than my brain could catch up. I don't remember the exact wording, but I know I started with something sharp, something I knew would cut through his ego. I hope she already knows about me. It wasn't just a question. It was an accusation wrapped in venom. Because deep down, I knew he hadn't told her. Men like him never do. They juggle two stories, two women, two lives, and they rely on silence to keep the truth from surfacing. That he responded almost immediately, which told me one thing. He'd been waiting for this. Maybe he thought I would just swallow the lie. Maybe he thought I'd stay quiet forever. But the second I broke the silence, he was ready to defend himself. "What are you talking about?" he typed back, followed by, "I've never talked to more than one girl at a time." I could almost hear his defensive tone through the screen, but then he slipped. He admitted he had come to my city specifically to meet this new girl and her parents. That's when I saw red. He hadn't just lied to me. He had lied with a straight face, taken my money, promised me we were exclusive, all while courting someone else seriously enough to involve her family. My reply was cruel, raw, unfiltered. I asked him if he was stupid or dumb, mocking him for thinking he could lie so sloppily and not get caught. I told him he was pathetic for stringing me along, for playing with people's emotions like it was a game. And then the fight really began. He shot back message after message, trying to twist the narrative. "You're overreacting. We were never that serious. You're acting crazy." But I wasn't about to let him gaslight me. Not this time. I reminded him of every late-night call, every conversation where he swore we were exclusive, every time he told me he wasn't talking to anyone else. I reminded him of the $30, not because I cared about the money, but because it symbolized the trust one had given him. Trust he had shattered without hesitation. The argument dragged on for nearly 20 minutes, each of us throwing words like knives. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, he blocked me. I sat there staring at my phone, adrenaline coursing through me, my chest heaving. For a split second, I thought it was over, but then, ping. He unblocked me, and the calls started. One after another, his name flashing across my screen, lighting up my dark room like a warning signal. He spammed me, desperate now, his control slipping. When I finally picked up, all I said was, "Can I help you?" My voice cold, steady, sobered by rage. He didn't apologize. He didn't even try to explain. Instead, he demanded to know if I had contacted the girl he was seeing, if I had told her about him. His voice was panicked, almost frantic. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing her. And that told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in his life. I leaned into the silence. Let it drag out just long enough for him to sweat. And then I said, "You'll find out soon enough." I hadn't texted her. I hadn't even considered it. But the fact that he thought I had, that he was terrified of me exposing him, gave me a strange sense of control for the first time since this entire mess began. I wasn't the one feeling small. I was the one holding the power. After I told him, You'll find out soon enough. I hung up, tossed my phone onto the couch, and sat there in the dim light of my apartment, heart still pounding. Part of me thought that was the end of it. He'd go stew in his own lies, maybe panic for a day or two, and then vanish like every other coward who can't face the truth. But I underestimated just how far he was willing to go to protect his double life. Not even 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. His number. Again, and again, and again. Spam calls, one after the other, until I finally had to silence my phone. I thought if I ignored him long enough, he'd get the message. But then came the texts, not from him, from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was spam, some telemarketer. But when I opened the message, my jaw dropped that IT was his aunt. Yes. His actual aunt had decided to insert herself into the drama. She sent me a long, angry paragraph about how immature I was being, how I was ruining his life, how I had no right to humiliate him over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I almost laughed out loud. Did she really think blocking me, lying about moving, and meeting another girl's parents behind my back was just a little hiccup? But the absurdity of it didn't make it hurt any less. Here I was, blindsided and humiliated, and instead of owning up to his behavior, he had dragged his family in to fight his battles for him. It was childish. It was pathetic. And it was insulting that I didn't reply to her. Honestly, what could I say? She wasn't the one I had been talking to for weeks, the one who had made me believe we were exclusive. She wasn't the one who had taken my money, looked me in the eyes, and lied. She was just another shield he was hiding behind, another person to blame so he wouldn't have to face the reality of his actions. But he wasn't done. After his aunt's message, he started calling again. This time, when I didn't pick up, he left voicemails. Rambling, desperate voicemails that swung back and forth between anger and pleading. 1 minute, he was yelling about how I had no right to mess with his relationship. The next, he was begging me not to ruin things for him, promising me that what we had still meant something. Listening to them was like watching someone unravel in real time. And honestly, a part of me enjoyed it. Not in a cruel way, but in a satisfying way, because for once, he was the one losing sleep, pacing around, panicking. Not me. Still, the situation had spiraled into something surreal. I had gone from being a girl talking to a guy she liked, to being ghosted, lied to, humiliated, and now harassed by his family. And all of it because I had dared to stand up for myself. By the end of that night, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about him, his lies, his fear of exposure, his inability to take responsibility. And as much as his family wanted to paint me as the villain, I refused to let myself believe that anymore, that I wasn't the villain, that I was the one who refused to stay silent. When the chaos finally quieted down, after the last voicemail had come in, after the notifications stopped lighting up my phone, after his aunt had had her say, I was left alone in the stillness of my apartment. And that's when everything really hit me. I curled up on the couch, staring at the ceiling, and felt this overwhelming mix of emotions washing over me, one after another, crashing like waves. First came the anger, hot, sharp, relentless. I replayed every message, every excuse, every smug defense he'd thrown at me, and I wanted to scream. How dare he twist the story? How dare he act like I was the problem, when all I had done was ask for honesty? But anger didn't last forever. It melted into something heavier. Shame that I thought about how I had told my friends about him, how I had let myself get excited, how I had started imagining a future with someone who clearly never valued me in the first place. I felt stupid, naive. I thought about the $30, not because it mattered, but because it symbolized trust. I had invested in him, however small, and he had taken advantage of it. And now his family thought I was the villain, some crazy girl who couldn't handle rejection. And then came the loneliness. That was the worst part. Because even though he had betrayed me, ghosted me, and disrespected me, a part of me still missed the idea of him. The late-night conversations, the little jokes, the attention that made me feel wanted. I knew it was fake. I knew it was temporary, but it had filled a void. And now, sitting in the quiet, that void felt even bigger. But as the hours passed, something unexpected began to surface. Strength to IT started small, like a spark. I remembered how he had panicked when he thought I might tell the other girl, how he had spammed my phone, how his voice cracked when he begged me not to ruin things for him. For once, he had been the one losing control. He had been the one scrambling, not me. And that realization settled into my bones like a kind of peace, because for weeks, I had felt powerless. Like I was just a side character in his story, a backup option until someone better came along. But in that one moment, when I stood up for myself, when I told him off instead of staying silent, I had reclaimed the narrative that I wasn't just the girl who got ghosted. I was the girl who refused to be erased. By the time I finally crawled into bed that night, I felt exhausted but lighter. My cheeks were still tear-stained, my chest still heavy, but there was a fire inside me now. A fire that whispered, "You are stronger than this. You are worth more than this. And you will never let someone treat you this way again." And as I drifted off to sleep, one final thought lingered in my mind. If standing up for myself made me the villain in his story, maybe I was okay with that. The next few days were strange. On the surface, life went on as usual. I still went to work, still scrolled through my feeds, still did the little things like laundry and grocery shopping. But under the surface, I felt like I was carrying this giant, buzzing secret, the story of how I had been played, humiliated, and then dragged through the mud by a guy who wasn't even worth half the effort. And then, people started to find out that IT began with my best friend. I hadn't told her everything at first because I was embarrassed. I didn't want to admit that I had lent him money or that I had gotten drunk and confronted him online. But she noticed something was off. The way I avoided looking at my phone. The way I sighed whenever a notification popped up. So one night, I finally broke down and told her everything. Her reaction was instant. "Girl, are you kidding me? He used you. Straight up. And then he had the audacity to sick his aunt on you? That's not just shady, that's pathetic." Hearing her say it out loud was both painful and freeing. Painful, because it made the humiliation real. But freeing, because it reminded me I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the disrespect. It had actually happened, and I had every right to be angry. Soon after, the story spread to a couple more friends. Each of them had the same reaction: disbelief, anger on my behalf, and then laughter at the absurdity of it all. They couldn't get over the aunt part. What kind of grown man needs his aunt to fight his battles? One of them joked. And for the first time since everything went down, I laughed too. A real laugh, not forced. Because yeah, when you said it out loud, the whole thing sounded ridiculous. But it wasn't all jokes. Some people gave me the tough love version. You should have blocked him the second he lied. Next time, don't lend money to someone you're not officially with. It stung to hear. But I knew they weren't wrong. The biggest surprise, though, came a week later. A girl I barely knew, someone I'd met a few times through mutual friends, messaged me out of the blue. She asked if I had been talking to M. My stomach dropped. I hesitated, but eventually admitted yes. And then she dropped the bomb. He had been talking to her too. At the same time, IT wasn't just me and the girl from the photos. There had been more. Suddenly, all the puzzle pieces fell into place. His evasiveness, his half-truths, his constant need to control the narrative. He wasn't some guy caught in one messy overlap. He was a pattern, a liar, a serial player. Instead of breaking me further, that revelation did the opposite. It made me feel validated, because now I knew it wasn't me. It wasn't about me being too much or too sensitive or not good enough. This was who he was. And if it hadn't been me, it would have been someone else, telling my story, hearing others react, learning I wasn't the only one. It gave me back a sense of control. It turned my shame into strength. And for the first time since it all started, I stopped asking myself, was I overreacting? And started telling myself, no, I was standing up for myself. After hearing from that other girl, the one who confirmed he had been talking to her too, something inside me finally clicked. For weeks, I had been replaying every little detail in my head. The late-night calls, the $30, the pictures with the other girl, the aunt's ridiculous message. I kept asking myself what I could have done differently. Should I have seen the red flags early? This was who he was. A man who lied without blinking. A man who used people and then discarded them when they weren't convenient anymore. A man so desperate to keep his facade intact that he dragged his aunt into the mess instead of taking responsibility. And I realized I couldn't keep giving him space in my head. So I made a decision. I sat down one evening with my journal, something I hadn't touched in months, and I wrote out everything. Every single thing I wanted to say to him, but never would. All the anger, the betrayal, the humiliation, the sadness. I poured it onto those pages until my hand cramped and the ink smudged under my fingers. And when I was done, I closed the journal and put it away, not because I forgave him, not because what he did was okay, but because carrying that weight any longer wasn't serving me. The next morning, I woke up lighter that I started focusing on myself again, meeting friends for coffee, picking up hobbies I had put on hold while I was glued to my phone, waiting for his texts. I even deleted his number, his photos, every trace of him from my devices. Not in a fit of rage, but calmly, intentionally, like clearing out clutter that no longer belonged in my life. And you know what? It felt good. For the first time since it all started, I felt like I was living my story, not as if there's one thing this entire mess taught me. It's this. Being ghosted says nothing about your worth. It says everything about the cowardice of the person who couldn't be honest. And if someone is too weak to face you with the truth, then they were never strong enough to deserve you in the first place. So no, I don't regret telling him off. I don't regret speaking my mind, even if it was messy, even if it was fueled by anger and a little too much alcohol. Because in that moment, I reclaimed my voice, and I refused to be ashamed of that. Just when I thought the chapter was closed, he tried one last time to claw his way back into my life. It was late on a Friday night. I had just gotten home from dinner with a couple of friends, feeling good, genuinely good, for the first time in weeks. My cheeks still hurt from laughing, and my phone was full of new photos from the evening. I felt alive, like I was slowly stepping back into myself. And then I saw a notification from an unfamiliar account on Instagram. At first, I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened it, my stomach turned. It was him. He had made a new account, a blank profile picture, almost no followers, and sent me a message. Hey, can we talk? That was it. 4 words. Simple. Pathetic. For a split second, my old instincts kicked in. The part of me that used to crave closure, that used to want answers. I almost felt my fingers twitch, ready to type back. About what? But then I stopped. What was there to say? What could he possibly tell me now that would erase the lies, the humiliation, the nights I cried myself to sleep while he was out meeting other women? What apology could undo the fact that he had dragged his aunt into our mess instead of facing me like an adult? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so, instead of replying, I did something else. I blocked the account without a second thought. No dramatic speech. No angry outburst. Just silence. Because silence, I realized, was the most powerful answer of all. That night, lying in bed, I felt a strange sense of peace. For so long, I had been chasing validation, waiting for him to admit what he did, waiting for him to recognize the pain he caused. But now, I understood that closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you. It comes from yourself. That I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his explanation. I didn't even need his acknowledgement. All I needed was to choose myself, and I had read it. Maybe I was petty, maybe I was messy, maybe I let my emotions spill out in ways that weren't perfect. But after everything, I don't regret telling him off. Because in that moment, and in every choice I made after, I proved to myself that I wasn't disposable. And if that makes me the asshole in his story, then so be it. Looking back now, I don't even recognize the girl I was at the beginning of this story. The one who waited by her phone, hoping for his texts. The one who loaned him money, excused his lies, and convinced herself that maybe he was just too busy. The one who swallowed her doubts because she wanted so badly to believe in someone. That girl is gone. Because what this whole mess taught me is simple but powerful. When people show you who they are, believe them. If someone lies, hides, manipulates, or makes you feel like you're crazy for asking basic questions, that's all the proof you need. You don't need to wait for the next red flag. You don't need to give them 10 more chances. And you definitely don't need to sacrifice your self-worth hoping they'll change. Being ghosted hurt. Being lied to hurt worse. But the real pain came from realizing how much of myself I gave away to someone who never deserved it. And once I understood that, I also understood this. I wasn't the villain of this story. I was the girl who refused to be erased. The girl who fought back, even if it wasn't pretty, even if it was messy, even if it involved some drunk texts and a lot of tears. I stood up for myself. And I'll never apologize for that. So, Reddit. Am I really the asshole? Or was I just finally brave enough to say out loud what so many of us think in silence? That we deserve better, and we won't settle for less. Thank you for watching this story on True Tales Hub. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, And turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next story that we post new tales twice a day, and each one comes with unexpected twists you won't see coming.